episode of MJ's Progress Not Perfection. Today's episode is shorter than usual, and you'll find out at the end why. But I guess I'll just say it. My building was being broken into while we were on the podcast by somebody. So, actually, around 17, 18 minutes in, you hear a door slam in the background, and you see me, whip my head because that's when they were trying to break in through the basement door, and I had to hang up to call the authorities and meet them outside and have them check our basement for a possible intruder. So that was fun, but it was a good podcast nonetheless. She has amazing recovery to talk about. She's been in recovery 19 years from alcohol. She has her master's degree. She's a therapist. She has her own podcast. They're all linked in here. You can find her Facebook group and you can find her podcast and everything just at the link in the description. So enjoy the episode. It is, a half hour instead of the usual hour, but that's on me because I needed to make sure that we weren't going to die in here. Welcome to the show. I appreciate you taking some time to talk to me today.
Sure.
How much clean time do you have?
I got sober July 1st, 2002.
Oh, so you have some good amount of time.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you have a podcast?
I do have a podcast. It's called Confident Sober Women. I have a Facebook group by the same name. And I'm a therapist, but I do EMDR trauma work in my private practice. And I also have an online coaching business. So I work with women all over the world to help them build emotional sobriety.
What is EMDR?
EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a neurologically based form of trauma treatment to help reprocess old and disturbing events.
Is that like when you also have headphones on?
You can use headphones. I use headphones and these little tappers that you hold in your hand. They vibrate back and forth. You can do traditional eye movement as well. You can even do tapping. There's a lot of modalities.
They were starting to do that at my IOP when I was in rehab and IOP 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. And one of the counselors at IOP, that's what he was starting to get into, was that thing. And I had only done it like twice. And then I was done the program and I left and I came back. So I didn't get to follow through to see how it actually, because, I know that doesn't work right away where you get, I'm sure it takes a few sessions, right? Where you really can learn something. Because where I did it wrong. I don't know.
Well, it does definitely take a little bit of a commitment. I mean, there's some value we can get out of certain techniques we can use in the moment that are just to de-escalate situations and really bring the emotional response down. But yeah, as far as processing through actual traumas and things, it takes a little bit of time, but it's much faster than traditional talk therapy, and it's much more effective because it literally heals the molecular structure of the brain and gives us greater relief from those emotional symptoms like anxiety, depression, and also into the future. So if you were to go in the future and have a similar experience or something that brought up those similar negative beliefs about yourself or feelings, we wouldn't be as emotionally stimulated by those things anymore once we're done processing through it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. Now, when you got sober, what was it that got you sober in 2002? What was going on then?
So I let's see. I was just drinking alcoholically I drank alcoholically for probably 10 years. I was a late bloomer. So I started a little bit later. I was relatively successful. I went to college, I have a master's degree. Actually, I got my master's at the very end of my drinking. I graduated from my master's program in May of 2002, which is hilarious to me. I think back on that, but I was a really, really, really sick little girl on the inside, and I was actively suicidal on a regular basis, and I hated myself and everything about myself, even though I was doing all of these external things. I had a job, a home, a husband, an education. And at the end of my drinking, I I always knew I was crazy. I just didn't think alcohol had anything to do with it. So I had lots of therapy, and I lied to my therapist, so it was never really helpful.
Yeah.
And at the end of my drinking, I got into a little bit of some legal trouble in at a conference, a professional conference in Washington D.C. And it was my first interaction with the law. I'd never had any DUI or anything, and I was paraded out in front of all my hundreds and hundreds of colleagues in a city that I don't know, and subjected to a variety of things that were pretty unpleasant. And following that, my family decided that I needed to go to rehab. So, um, I landed in rehab and I didn't think I belonged there. I spent about 2 weeks kind of crying about it and saying I didn't belong in there and that my people were going to come and get me. And, they didn't come.
Mhm.
And the staff members and people and the owner of that treatment center used to hang out in the cafeteria and say things like, normal drinkers don't end up in rehab. And I didn't understand why I was there. I really didn't. And then I had my first spiritual awakening. I think I turned 27 in rehab, so my birthday while I was there, and I was sitting out on this beautiful lawn, and I had my first spiritual experience, I guess, or awakening in my view. When I kind of just was overlooking this beautiful piece of property and kind of evaluating my life at that time, and I had the overwhelming feeling that I needed to make some kind of a surrender. I don't know that I could use those words at that time, but really kind of turn my life over, give it up,
Yeah,
Um,
eventually we learned what the words were, how we were feeling. I feel like, I didn't know words like surrender, like except
mhm.
for war, and then you find out, oh, I was in a war and it was within myself. You know,
Yeah,
you don't know these things when you're in addiction because you're so foggy and blinded by everything else. Everything's all about me, but really nothing was about me because I didn't really ever look inside me. That's
yeah,
how
you're
I
so
felt.
right. And I think it's important for you to say that and for us to talk in that way because, when you've been sober for any length of time, especially if you worked a 12-step program or whatever you use to get sober, we have a language that develops. We have a recovery language now that we infiltrate into our lives. But if you're new, or if you're still trying to figure it out, or you're sober curious and you hear words like that, it can be very confusing. And so then that could potentially keep people from getting sober, and so it's important to say things like that because we speak as if we know all the things, like we were sitting in treatment, we knew all the things, right?
Yeah.
And we don't.
And you're a master's degree, so you really know all the things.
Y-
You have that kind of ego, I'm sure. Like, I know I would. I barely finished college, and I didn't even finish college, and I still had an ego. Like I was the smartest guy in the room. I was my own therapist and my own pharmacist. You know,
yeah, I mean, I think that the education was good. Like I was educated. I didn't have any real exposure to alcoholism in my life. Like my family is all very heavy drinkers, I would call them. We were around a lot of drinking and alcohol and partying and stuff, but there was really no alcoholics in my life. So I had never been exposed to anybody or AA or any of that. And
yeah,
so I got educated formally on those kinds of topics. So I knew about it, but I really didn't know
yeah.
what it
I
looked like.
Yeah, the word I never really knew that was used was gratitude. I
Mm,
knew it was used during Thanksgiving. You know what I mean? I'm grateful for this, and you go around the table and you say that. But like, I don't remember ever using it outside of Thanksgiving ever in my life until I was like 31 and in recovery. Like, I never heard people using that word, gratitude and grateful until rehab when we started doing like daily 10 steps. We had to do a gratitude list, and I'm like, wait, we're supposed to think about this every day? Like, I did not know those things like until early on, and then you start learning. So I'm assuming by your terminology, like surrender, you did go through 12 steps.
I did. I got sober in AA, and
Can I ask
that's
where? 'Cause AA is different everywhere in my experience.
sure. I live in Maryland.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, I got sober in AA because back then I share a lot about this now because there really, at least in my world, was nothing else. There was no other way. Most of the time when people were struggling with alcoholism and addiction, they went to AA or there was 12 step. There was no smart recovery, there was no quit lit, there was no Facebook groups,
Yeah.
new meaning, none of that.
That's
So
what we
one
run
day,
here. Actually, we're a mental health meeting center, and we
excuse
do
me.
4 or 5 meetings every single day here that are mental health based. Like Saturdays are trauma based. Tonight is LGBTQ night. You know, every night is some harm reduction night, and plus we have 2 mental health check-in meetings for anybody, whether it's trauma, anxiety, depression, addiction.
Mhm.
Come on in and talk about your day, whether it's
That's
in the
awesome.
morning or at night. So like, cause AA I loved, but they didn't really like me because I use cannabis in my recovery. I went to a
Mhm.
rehab that taught me how to change my relationship with it, and I still to this day don't smoke. I just use the like little capsules whenever I take my medicine, and it just it's different, but it works for me. But still, I'm open about it. But they didn't want me to even share in a meeting. It's like, oh, you're on methadone, you're on Suboxone, you're on this, you
Mhm.
can't talk. So here we are in my own meeting center that allows anybody, no matter what your recovery looks like, just come on in and talk. So
Yeah, I love that. I think it's been a very interesting journey for me in these last 19 years because, like I said, that was really the only thing. And so I was very loyal to my program, right? I loved AA really saved my life, helped me save my marriage, helped me become a person. I mean, I had zero skills or anything positive mental health. I mean, so I needed a lot of that kind of help, and it worked for me, and it was really, really positive, and I had great sponsorship. Um, so I felt very loyal to the program. Now there came a time for me for sure when I needed more, right? Because sobriety is only the beginning, and so at year 4 I had my first sober bottom. That's what I call it. It's, it was a time when I just really got to that same space of desperation that as I had at the end of my drinking, but I wasn't drinking or using. And I was really desperate, and I, had to kind of call out and reach out for help and start changing again, right? So, but it's been an interesting journey in these last, I'd say, probably 4 or 5 years, particularly as I started my business. It was difficult for me to show up authentically, completely as who I am and what I am. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not ashamed, but publicly to be able to talk about this stuff on Facebook, out loud, in public spaces is so against being raised in AA, right? And so
yeah,
I had to really work on that and pray a lot about it and kind of meditate about how I wanted to handle this because I was trying to force myself into being this like anxiety coach, which is fine. I can be an anxiety coach. I know a ton about anxiety and how to treat it. Um, it's exact same work that I use in my courses with women now who are sober. So the material is the same. How I was presenting myself was not authentic. So I finally had that an epiphany where I was like, wait a second, I need to just show up as and be who I am fully. Because then I can talk about who I am. Like then I can talk about what it's like to have a sober bottom.
yeah, it's a
What
lot
it
easier to relay things and say things when you can be authentic and not worry about tripping over words you shouldn't say.
right, and when I can literally share my own experience. And
Yeah,
so that was really a huge change for me. And as I started to dive into some of these other women who are writing incredible books like Laura McGowan, We Are the Luckiest. Holly Whitaker wrote the Quit Like a Woman. I mean, there's these Annie Grace. There's all these amazing women who are brilliant and studying addiction and history and putting these books out that are just to me so enlightening and fascinating. And they're talking about things like being sober curious, and they're talking about how they didn't get sober right away and it took them a long time and they had to just keep trying different things and keep putting tools in place, but it like wasn't necessarily working, but they took a long time to get there, I guess is my point. And so it's been an interesting journey to really learn about what I call modern recovery, right? With these people who are doing it other ways. That there are other ways to get sober besides AA, which I was told back in the beginning, from the beginning, that AA is not the only way to get sober. It's just the only way I know. But I didn't know any other way.
yeah.
So,
And even if there was those groups out there, it's not as noticeable because there wasn't social media. I mean, MySpace wasn't social media compared to what social media is today. MySpace was not like anything close to what social media looks like today, in my opinion, like with the groups and what you can do. And I'm not even bashing AA. I went through the 12 steps, and when I got sober in California, I went to AA at there. I was going to so many meetings. I loved my sponsor. I had multiple mentors that I would talk to about things also. I went through the steps. I had a spiritual awakening. It was amazing out there. It was very liberal, though. I could talk about pills in AA. I could talk about how I used cannabis in my recovery in AA. And then I got back to Pennsylvania, and they're like, you can't say pills, you have to say alcohol. Oh, you use cannabis, you can't even share. And it's like, it was just like.
It's so interesting. I actually had an interaction with a client of mine, a private practice client of mine, who's in recovery, and she's fairly early. And I work with a lot of women in recovery, and she was sharing how she's using the Vivitrol shot, which I have a couple clients that have had that experience, and she's getting raised up in AA, and she loves it, and she's got phenomenal support and groups, and really, really happy with it. But this woman came after her the other day because she had her bracelet on, and I thought, hey, first of all, mind your business.
Yeah.
Second of all, why would you ever say anything to somebody about how they're choosing to support their recovery if it's working for them? Like, I find that to be very distasteful, and I understand the integrity of AA. I get it, and I believe in the integrity of AA, but I just don't think it's anybody's business. That's like saying if you take Zoloft because you have anxiety, and somehow that was publicly known on you, you had a sign that say I take Zoloft, that there's something wrong with you. It's prescribed by your doctor, and it's given to you as a tool. It literally says in the book. It literally says in the book. They wrote in the book, and it's prescribed by a doctor, and you're using it as a medicine. It is okay. Like, they were using, like, I can't talk. I'm like, all right, I'm not going to come anymore. So here we are in my own meeting center that allows anybody, no matter what your recovery looks like. It literally says in the book, they wrote in the book, and it's prescribed by a doctor, and you're using it as a medicine. It is okay. Like, they were using, like, crazy stuff for their recoveries back in the 30s and 40s, like basically acid. Like, you know what I mean? Like, our version of that, like, they even talk about all that kind of stuff in the book. And on top of that, I think the type of person that would say that is somebody who is at their bottom, somebody who is in their bottom of an AA, where they're just, like, looking for something to, like, be mad about and to, like, start an argument. Because you know how I talked about this before. It wasn't AA I love. I love the program. I love the big book. I love the steps. I love the traditions. Like most things, it's the people. It depends on the people. And in some places, I've had amazing people in the program that I'm still good friends with to this day. And then in other places, we parted ways because it wasn't working, and it is what it is. And I think AA is still an amazing program. And I still think the steps. I have a sponsee that he also has a Vivitrol shot. When I opened this place up, he came in here and he said, hey, can you help me go through the steps? And I said, yeah, it's fine. Let's do it. So we've been going through the steps. It's not AA, but we've been using Russell Brand's recovery book. Okay.
And, he went through AA and he just did his own version of the big book. And he wrote a book that was his version of breaking it down for, like, crazy addicts to read, just like he read it. And it's been awesome. So we've been reading that together instead, just to do something a little bit different and not be, like, using AA in here. But I love the 12 steps. I think they're amazing. Like, doing a 10 step every day and checking yourself every day is so important that a lot of people don't think about. And thinking about gratitude.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's the design
victories.
for living. It's the design for living that really works. I mean, my second sponsor used to say things like, I wish everybody in my life would get drunk and lose everything so they can come to AA. Because it really is a design for living that works, that regular people walking around don't have guidance for. And we see evidence of that. I'm sure you do in your own life or in your programs. Like, we see evidence of that all over the place. How many people do we know that are just not well? They're not well.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, exactly. And I'm like, you should just, and I've said this, I'm like, whatever is making your life unmanageable, go through the steps and take out that word alcohol and put in whatever it is that's making you unmanageable in this situation. Yeah. And if you want help, I'll help you go through it. And you're going to feel a lot better about it at the end. I even had somebody that we went through to get over an ex. We put her name in there. And he felt a lot better about going through it that way. So he'd already been through the steps before with, alcohol and drugs. So why not go through it that way?
Yeah, I
And
agree. I think that it's really cool that we have the opportunity to obtain so much information. We have that we can consume so much information now, and like now it's way better than when I first got sober. When we didn't really have much going on the internet, and so now we just
no,
have so
yeah,
much access to stuff. And you're talking about the different groups. It made me think of like any institution. Like churches, for example, is another great example of that. Like how many people, I mean, I've seen so many women come through my room who have major spiritual trauma, major. I mean, some stuff that you just can't believe people would do in the name of God, right? In these kind of horrible churches. And then other people who are super spiritually connected and feel super connected to their church and their community and their people, because that's just the way that church runs. And so there's always going to be wherever there are people, there are going to be uh, you know flaws. Every institution, every employer, every school building, they're filled with people, and people are just inherently flawed. And so when you have a bunch of them that aren't well, alcoholics or not, they're just
yeah.
not well. They're angry, they're damaged, they have their own issue. They're going to do with whatever they can to spread that mess, to anybody who will listen. And so when we stay stuck in somebody else's mess, it hurts us, and it prevents us from getting, in touch with the sunlight of the spirit, really, and stepping into that light.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, I'm not even a religious person, and I used to be, I grew up Catholic, and I had a tough time, with it early on in AA. And then someone said, there's a difference. Is religions people who fear hell, and spirituality people who've been there and back.
Hmm.
And that made a lot of sense to me. But still, I can respect anybody that can find like peace within themselves, whatever it is, whether it is the Bible, whether it's going to churches, whether it's just find support with people that you can trust and you can open up to, and you're going to feel a lot better about yourself.
Yeah, I agree. Spirituality means so many different things to so many different people. And it's really is inherently in all of us, I believe, that there is a spiritual side to all of us. We're just born with that.
Yeah.
And whether it's connection through nature or, Mother Earth or the spirit or universe or God, whatever it is, like I do believe that we all do need to find some kind of connection outside of ourselves, because eventually people disappoint, and so if we run out of resources, including ourselves, where we have nowhere else to turn, what then? And
Yeah.
so if we don't have some kind of sense of something, it's going to be a real lonely experience.
Yeah, and it was a lonely experience. As I didn't think that I was lonely going to bars with friends and going out, and I was around people, but like I was alone in my mind, that's for sure.
Hmm.
Like, I wanted to be somewhere else every single time, and it was in a corner in a fetal position and just like not thinking about stuff.
Yeah.
Like, did you get into any? You didn't get any drugs. You were like a real deal alcoholic, as I would say.
Pretty much. I mean, there was some weed around. It just never, I always say that it never came across my face. I'm sure I would have liked anything that anybody would have given me, but
Yeah.
for some reason, it never, in our circles, that just wasn't a part of the scene.
Well,
And
that's good.
so
Yeah.
there was no opportunity for me to try stuff. But I always say, I'm sure I would have liked it.
Yeah, because I feel like that time period is when like ecstasy was like at its height,
Mm.
and that was like all over the clubs and the bars and stuff like that. So that's why I wasn't sure being college aged, but that was like the only reason because I was in high school then. I wasn't doing ecstasy, but that's when Bad Boys 2 made that movie, and it was all about that. That's the only reason why I know it was around that time period for
That's so
sure.
funny. I
Yeah.
think I was a little scared of drugs too, just from the way we were raised and stuff. I mean, like I said, I mean, in our high school circles and stuff, it was definitely drinking. It's
Yeah.
definitely alcohol. There was a little bit of weed, but not even really. It's so funny. I have three teenagers now. They're almost 18, 16, and 14. And the weed is like the thing. I mean, there's like, they don't really drink that much. They're afraid of drinking, a little bit.
Well, that's
They
good.
because of my story, but I think they hear the things, girls get raped when they're drinking, people get in accidents, things like that, but they sure do love some weed.
Hmm.
Um, but so now the generational shift has happened, I believe, where weed is definitely the thing.
Well, that's a
Um,
lot better than, because number one, the weed back when I was in high school, 2000s, mid 2000s, it wasn't anywhere near what it is today.
yeah, it didn't
Um,
have fentanyl in it.
well, especially, yeah, well, fentanyl's in everything now. That's actually the person who has the Vivitrol. I reminded him because meth was his drug of choice besides alcohol. And I reminded him that don't forget there's fentanyl in your meth around now, right now. Like
Yeah,
you can't go to that either. Like that's gonna
no,
make you sick.
I know.
So like it's unbelievable. I just read about a comedian in LA and three of his friends that overdosed because they did cocaine over the
Yeah,
weekend and it was laced.
yeah,
Yeah, I am
scary.
deathly afraid of relapse
Mm,
because it's not even like I don't trust myself to do a one and done. I don't trust the one and done. I don't trust whatever's going to be in there.
yeah,
I would be one and done, because you don't know what's in there anymore. And I just don't, I don't need it. I
mm,
needed it then. I needed it in my 20s because I didn't know any better. I didn't know about all these things. I didn't know it was okay to feel bad, and guys with mental health, is a big thing because we're not supposed to show it.
mm,
We have to keep it in because that's how we're raised. It's like, oh, don't show weakness, don't show the weakness. So,
mhm.
you're made to like keep it in and find ways to keep it in, and then it just hurts. And you don't know how to let it out. But once I let it out, there's no going back now. I don't want that at all anymore. Um,
Mhm.
I do have to cut you short because I have to call the cops because somebody just tried breaking into my building. So yeah, if you saw me looking down, I just had to text my landlord and say, "Was that you?" And she said no. So I
Oh my
need to hop
gosh.
off. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not your fault. Yeah, this is like the third time they tried breaking in over the weekend too. But I'm here all the time, so they keep on getting scared and running. So
Okay.
I gotta file something. I'm sorry. I'll let you know. Yeah, I'm sorry. I gotta.
Well, best of luck. Sorry.
Thank you.
Oh,
No, it's okay. It's not you. I'm
all
sorry.
right.
Bye.
Bye.